Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Occupy Wall Street is winning. Hundreds of thousands of bankers and brokers are being laid off. That's right. Get rid of the banksters. That's what we're aiming for. Stacy Herbert, tell us more.
Well, Max, here's a headline from the Reformed Broker. Rough times for the brokerage industry. Bankers are being laid off.
That's right. Well, those are like the bomb makers, aren't they? So we got to get rid of them.
Brokers are being laid off.
Yeah, those are the financiers of the bomb makers, so we got to get rid of those terrorists.
Traders are being laid off.
Yeah, the traders, they create the fuses for the bombs that are sold by the bankers and brokers. Lay them off. They're terrorists.
Support staff are being laid off.
Collateral damage.
Product people are being laid off.
Those are marketing people. They try to sell the idea that the brokers and bankers and the fuse makers are selling in worthwhile products to blow up economies. Got to get rid of them. They're terrorists.
Wealth management people are being laid off.
Those are the people that try to convince the wealthy that they should take massive losses in their account to finance the bankers and brokers and candlestick makers and fuse makers and marketing people to build the bombs to blow everybody up.
And finally, analysts are being laid off.
Analysts provide the neo-economic liberal concatenations of the academic model, like a Nouriel Roubini, to prove that blowing people up for economic glory makes some kind of academic sense. He's got to go. All them guys got to go. They're terrorists.
Well, Max, the headlines on this continue. Wall Street unoccupied with 200,000 job cuts. To those people, I say, here's a McDonald's application. Go get a job, you peasants.
Suck it up! Yes, Charlie Munger would say. Suck it up!
Well, the article starts off introducing John Brady, the co-head of MF Global Incorporated's Chicago office. He's looking to join a firm now, as he's lost his job, that believes integrity and honesty are the single most important ingredients to success.
Yeah, there's always, in a foxhole, people discover God. After this guy has been committing massive fraud knowingly, willingly, and sucking on the teat of the massive global fraud, suddenly he wants to be a good boy and work for an ethical company. I say, to the gallows to you, my friend!
But the other point, you've made this before, is that the system is fraud. So if he's looking for one with integrity and honesty, those two just don't go together. That's like saying, I want an honest mafia don. I don't want to work for one of these thugs that kill people and put cement boots on them and throw them into the Hudson.
Exactly. He should get a job as a florist or a dog walker, something like that, where his ability to cause trouble is minimized.
Well, there are some more unemployed bankers and those who service the bankers, Max. Foreclosure firm Stephen J. Baum to close down. Now, the funny thing about this is, of course, they were fired because of those images, those photos from Halloween where they dressed up as the clients that they illegally foreclosed upon. And they thought it was so hysterical. But because Freddie Mac, the major underwriter of half of the mortgages in the U.S., the government-sponsored entity that the taxpayer now completely owns, well, they stopped allowing anybody to use them. So they had to go out of business. But the guy who heads Stephen J. Baum firm, he wrote a letter to Joe Nocera from the New York Times, who is the first one to publish those photos. And he said, Mr. Nocera, you have destroyed everything and everyone related to Stephen J. Baum. It took 40 years to build this firm and 3 weeks to tear it down.
I don't know why it took so long to tear this sucker down. Because they've been involved in a massive fraud for probably 39 of those 40 years. This guy needs to get on the bread line into the soup kitchen and beg for a crust of bread on his way to the gallows.
But you could apply his own charges against Mr. Nocera to the whole U.S. economy, the U.S. empire. It took 40, 50, 60 years to build that up, and a few months for the bankers to take it down. Less than a few months, one day, really, in 2008.
Well, it's a good point. You know, the U.S. economy is built on the back of massive debt expansion, and then once it becomes clear that the debt can't be serviced, it evaporates like a hologram in the wind. And that's exactly what we're seeing now, because people understand that the U.S. economy, Wall Street, it's just one big Enron. And once confidence evaporates, so does all the equity. And it's good night, Marie.
Now, it was the images of them at Stephen J. Baum dressed as the homeless that they had made homeless. that really resulted in the firm going out of business. Now I want to turn to this image here that I saw on the OccupyWallStreetNews.org. And it's an image of some cyborgs or policemen, I can't tell, but they're protecting J.P. Morgan Chase. And with that in mind, I want to look at these next headlines, most of them involving J.P. Morgan Chase. MF Global, the mess that keeps getting messier. So this is an article on CNN Money from Leah McGrath Goodman, a friend of the show. And apparently big institutional investors are getting a taste of what many frustrated taxpayers experienced during the financial crisis, being on the hook for losses of a major financial firm against their wishes. Now, remember, the trustees have now announced that, in fact, there's a $1.2 billion black hole of missing client funds, which coincidentally happens to be the exact same amount of MF Global funds at J.P. Morgan, which J.P. Morgan is not releasing to the trustees or the clients of MF Global. So with that, she says, although MF Global owes J.P. Morgan $1.2 billion as an unsecured creditor, clients of MF Global whose funds are still missing should not have to beg J.P. Morgan for relief. We're simply asserting that if MF Global commingled funds from customer accounts or cannot properly account for them, J.P. Morgan can't lay claim to those funds as if they were their own, says one investor in MF Global.
Look, J.P. Morgan's balance sheet is severely impaired, and a lot of smart money is short J.P. Morgan. You know, my guess is that Jim Rogers, who said he is short a big money bank, but he didn't give the name. I'll just guess that it's J.P. Morgan. He can comment on that if he wishes. But I think the smart money is massively short J.P. Morgan stock, because this stock, if you mark to market anything and everything, is worth less than zero.
But it's a theme here I'm really focused on, Max, is that we have been focusing on is that the millionaires, the 100 millionaires, if you make, you know, one of these hedge fund guys think, oh, I make 200 million a year, I'm like the top 1.01%, I'm one of these guys, JP Morgan will take care of me. Well, they're getting wiped out. Their funds are being stolen now because all the peasants have nothing. They have nothing but debt, and they're already on J.P. Morgan's gulag farm.
All right, exactly. The bar for fraud and malfeasance is being raised all the time. Now it's including those folks, you know, who are aspiring to the Fortune 400 list. Next year it'll be the folks on the Fortune 400 list.
And of course, Max, a lot of the hedge fund managers and bankers are throwing job applications at the Occupy Wall Street protesters. So another interesting quote from this article is that Leah McGrath Goodman spoke to a hedge fund manager who goes unnamed. He's anonymous. What's different about this case, she asks? Well, according to this one hedge fund executive, summed it up best. What is scary about MF Global is that there is no political will in this country to look out for people. Let this be a lesson that if someone tries to steal from you, there is no one who is going to save you. I mean, it is literally the most frightening thing that could happen in finance.
Duh. I mean, it's kind of funny when all these hedge fund people, Greenwich, Connecticut sorts, finally wake up to the economy as it actually exists. For tens of millions and 100 million people in America now have either one foot in or about to enter the poverty zone. And so now this hits the Greenwich, Connecticut living, the Paul Tudor Jones types out there, hedge fund managers who suddenly realize that they're supporting a massively corrupt system, and the tears are just bolting out of their eyeballs. They can't be, oh, woe is me, oh, boo-hoo. Well, they said nothing when the people started getting their wealth confiscated. You know, the people on with low-paying jobs, the people who were marginalized by society, by the fraud committed by Wall Street. They said nothing. Now they're coming for you. And my advice is to STFU.
Here's J.P. Morgan seizing the funds from the guys who thought they were in the 1% and that protected them, when it's the 0.00001% that you'll see actually at the end of the day will get everything. And J.P. Morgan, as you know, administers the food stamp program in America. So I want to turn to this story here to look at how much fraud J.P. Morgan has committed that has come to light over the last few years, and not once have they had to admit to guilt, and always they paid a fraction of their ill-gotten gains as a fine. Woman given 3-year prison term for lie. So a federal judge has sentenced a woman to 3 years in federal prison for lying on her food stamp application. This is in Mississippi, and apparently, if you've ever been charged with a crime involving drugs, you're never allowed to collect any benefits. So she applied for food stamps, and she lied, saying she had never been charged with crimes involving drugs. But she had 2 boys to feed, 2 children. So she received $4,367 over the few years in food stamps. When she was caught, she paid it back, and still this judge bypassed sentencing guidelines that suggested she receive 2 to 8 months in prison and would have made her eligible for probation just immediately, so she would have never gone to jail. But instead, the judge sentenced her under a federal statute that carries a maximum 5 years sentence. He said, quote, "The defendant's criminal record is simply abominable. She has been the beneficiary of government generosity and state court."
Right, so the judge is pointing this woman as a cheater of a food stamp program that J.P. Morgan administers. And while administering it, they've committed already on the books 3 massive episodes of multi-hundred-million-dollar fraud.
I think billion.
Of which they've paid only pennies on the dollar without having to admit that they're guilty. Now, you wonder why there's an Occupy movement. You wonder why the people are staging an uprising. You wonder why Jamie Dimon doesn't feel safe when he goes home at night. You wonder why he looks over his shoulder, seeing when the people will come for him.
Just to see where this is heading, so all of these bankers, the J.P. Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, the Bank of America, the Citigroups, they've benefited from huge amounts of federal taxpayer dollars. They've been bailed out by all the taxpayers over and over again. Here's, I think, something you could look for them to do now, because they used the financial emergency to get all these TARP funds, these bailout funds. Well, former AIG CEO sues, claiming taxpayers need to pony up $25 billion. Yes, remember, the taxpayers given AIG over $70 billion when their stock price was down at almost zero. Now, Hank Greenberg, on Monday last week, filed a $25 billion lawsuit against the U.S., claiming that the government takeover of the insurer was unconstitutional, claiming that he was not given just compensation.
Well, look, I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? Because at the crisis stage, it was deemed that we couldn't possibly put any of these guys in jail. We need to look forward. Remember, this is Barack Obama. He's saying we got to go forward. Well, of course, the risk is that these criminals will just come back to the trough again and ask for more money, as this guy Hank Greenberg is doing.
And remember, Max, last week we covered the story of the Chinese thief who broke into a woman's house and then yelled at her for not giving him enough money, that she was not working hard enough to have something worth stealing. And this is what these guys who ripped us off the first go-round, now they're coming back saying, we want more. You didn't pay us enough for our crimes.
Hank Greenberg, what a putz. All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming your way, so stay right there.